Thank you so much. I actually took a little bit of liberty and changed the topic to make it more relevant. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. I also apologize ahead of time. I just arrived 3 a.m. this morning, so I'm somewhat fresh. Just to round out my background, I started out at AT&T Wireless in the mid '90s as a webmaster there. I was fortunate enough to start my career at a time where the web was getting started. Then I joined eBay and took a lot of my e-commerce experience to helping scale eBay at a time where they were trying to figure out how to make transactions happen on the web. Then I joined PayPal, of course, and spent about 9 years running engineering and product there. Built the 5 main products that they have out today. I joined Google because I felt there was a lot more disruptive opportunity, especially in online and offline coming together. What does the future of payments look like there? I spent 3 years there and pioneered a lot of the NFC wallet in smartphone ideas. And about a year and a half ago, I started my own company, Poynt, because I believe there's a lot more work to be done on the merchant side. And I'll be talking to you today about where I feel the payment industry is going and why. These are personal views more than anything else, so feel free to ask me questions about it afterwards. I'm going to start by going through a short story that I like to tell. Sometimes we wonder, how did we get here with technology? Because the answer feels so odd. And so this is a story about technology and history. And it starts with the space shuttle, arguably humanity's greatest technological achievement. It represents the best of transportation. But did you know that the space shuttle is limited in how far it can travel? The space shuttle can't travel to Mars. It can't even travel to the moon. The distance the space shuttle travels is limited by the size of these round things on the side of the space shuttle. They're called solid rocket boosters, or SRBs for short. And the diameter of the SRBs determine the distance the space shuttle can travel. So then you wonder, well, why can't they just make them wider? Well, they're made by a company called Thiokol in the Midwest of the USA. And they're transported by train through these big mountains. You have to make a hole in them. And the hole determines the size of the SRBs, believe it or not. So that you can't make them bigger because the hole in the mountain is that size. So then you wonder, well, why couldn't they make the hole in the mountain bigger? Well, it's based on railroad gauge. 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. That's U.S. railroad gauge. So then you wonder, well, why is the railroad gauge this wide? Well, it goes back to English expats who built U.S. railroads. And that was the gauge in England, 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. So why did they use that gauge? Well, it goes back to pre-tram railways. That's the gauge for them. Well, why? Because the same guys who built the railroads built the tramways, and they used the same tools, picks, to make that gauge. And so then, why? Because if the same guys that built the railroads in England also built wagons. And if you didn't want your wagon wheels to fall off, they had to fit in these ruts in the road. And that was the gauge for wagons, believe it or not. So why was it the gauge for wagons? Well, it turns out that most of the long-distance roads in Old England were built by the Roman Empire, and that was the gauge for Roman war chariots. And so why did Roman war chariots? I know you're wondering at this point, is there an end to this story? So why did the Romans have this gauge? That was simple. It was the distance between two horses' asses. And so to recap, the reason the most advanced transportation device of our time is limited is because of two horses' asses. So then what does this have to do with payments? And wow, you guys are a tough crowd. I thought I was early. That was, by the way, a very good joke. So what does this have to do with payments? Well, a lot of where we are with payments today, especially credit card rails, is incremental thinking. We just kept adding to what we had in the past. And so you wonder, well, when do we break out? When does something completely new, something differentiated, when do you leapfrog? When do you get to a brand new technology? Well, we thought that was the web. And we thought that web infrastructure and web technology was going to be the future of everything. And it turns out that 17 years into e-commerce, it's still not that far, actually. Only 8% of commerce has moved online. And if you go back in history, because payments actually rarely changes, there's only been 3 major payment methods in the history of our world. 3 payment methods that have achieved scale. Coins, paper, and plastic. And if you look at each one and how it came about, coins were around for thousands of years. But it took the technology accelerating the pace of commerce to the point that friction was so pent up that a new method was required. And that's how it always happens, actually. A huge technology breakthrough, usually in communication, allows advertising to happen at a much faster pace, which increases the pace of commerce, which creates pent-up demand for payments to remove that friction, and a new payment method occurs. So in this case, the printing press, believe it or not, is what caused that huge acceleration in commerce. The ability to make copies of a poster or a sign or an advertisement enabled far-reaching communication of products, which in turn required us to evolve how we transport payment methods. Coins were simply just too heavy, not very portable. They're not very secure because they were precious metals, and so you could get robbed on the way. And as a result, we came up with paper. Paper money allowed us to a lot more portability. It allowed us to attribute value to paper and create almost endless amounts of it, which has gotten us in trouble a few times. And then for plastic, it was a couple of things. Broadcast, television especially, accelerating commerce even further, getting the word out about a product globally, accelerated commerce even further. Just imagine a world where you can't go to another country and swipe a credit card and the transaction just works. So obviously paper and the exchange value and is it accepted here, all the government involvement made it difficult. And as a result, the idea of a modem and the ability to authorize a transaction in real time made way. Even though the credit card predated electronic authorization, it wasn't until electronic authorization that we saw an explosion in credit card adoption. And so, well, where does that leave us now? Where do we go from here? Well, I'm sure this is not news to you. Mobile dominates. But I want to tell you a little bit about how it dominates and why it's different. Why it's not like the web where it's just another channel, but it's actually the game changer. It does feel like that next major revolution in payments. And so it starts with the idea that I can now use the phone all the time. It's no longer internet a couple of times a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. It's available in my pocket all the time. I can use it to tell my location, to tell traffic. I can use it to order a car. Uber is one of the most successful companies in history. I can use it to order food, skip the line. I could use it to actually, I don't know if TaskRabbit has made it here, but you can get someone to do just about any task that you want through this app that we have in the US. And all you have to do is request it, and literally within a few minutes, somebody will sign up for whatever task you ask them to do. In this case, vacuuming your home. The reality is the pattern here is the mobile phone has become a remote control of sorts for the world. Almost every task you want to do in everyday life is now enabled by this remote control that allows hyper convenience and the ability to do whatever you want faster, easier. And it's really raised consumer expectations. It's the first time in history where consumers' expectations of technology are ahead of the industry's ability to achieve them. And that's because most of the time, people are building crazy things that aren't needed yet. But today, unlike any other time in history, consumers are carrying around supercomputers in their pocket. We're very tech savvy. At a very young age, we learn to leverage and wield technology in a way that hasn't happened before. And we see all of these magical examples, and we can go online and learn how to do these things at a young age. Now my kids are already coding at 7 years of age, that you begin to imagine what's possible yourself, and you begin to ask for it, and the industry hasn't delivered it yet. And so expectations are way ahead of our industry's ability to address them. It's also, if you look at the span of consumer devices, we used to all sit around a table before the television and talk, believe it or not, talk face to face. That was the extent of communication. After television, we all centered around the TV. And you know, it was still a group activity. In the PC age, as the number of devices accelerated, we began to individualize our conversation, but it would reach a little bit further than normal. But in the mobile age, we can now roam around with these communication devices. And they're multiplying exponentially, but more importantly, as opposed to in the pattern we saw in the PC age where you often used it twice a day, the average person uses their phone 150 times per day, on average every 6 minutes. It's a level of engagement that we have never seen before. You know, in the early days of the web, we used to talk about the number of users you had. That number has almost become irrelevant because the number of users online is so broad, it doesn't matter. But most importantly, the number of interactions have grown exponentially. So your ability to reach even a smaller number of people, but engage them more often, has created enormous opportunity. And so in my home, you see this in the form of, even though we're all around the TV, we're still looking at our own devices, right? Everyone's still pulling out their own device and looking at it while watching television. And as this chart suggests, in almost every country around the world, the yellow here is smartphone, and the red is tablet use, and both have already outpaced television and PCs. So the amount of engagement, even though smartphones are still a fifth of televisions, the number of smartphones in the world is a fifth of televisions, and the number of tablets is still a fifth of PCs, the amount of engagement has already outpaced it. And this will continue to accelerate. So the other thing that's going to change here is retail itself is going to look very different. You know, we had this first phase of the web where all of the early big retailers said, I'm not interested, the web is really this new marketing paradigm, nobody will ever buy in it. Then a few companies got there early, eBay, Amazon, and the like, and they made some very big businesses and became household names, and retailers moved in, but the way they moved in is they created a separate organization inside of each company, the e-commerce organization. And they created their own technology, and they created their own management structure. And for a while, we thought the e-commerce group was going to lead the whole company. But in the mobile age, what's happening is it's no longer about the specific channel. And the consumer's 180, that high expectation that I talk about, the most pronounced version of it is consumers now expect online and offline to feel seamless, to move between your channels, but they still want you as a retailer to know who they are. They want to know that you searched online, then went to the store to pick it up, or went to the store and found the item you wanted, but you didn't want to carry it home, so you asked them to ship it home. So this idea of omni-channel commerce is the new normal. And in fact, it's become so normal and so pronounced that a couple of years ago, every retailer on earth was scared of Amazon. What's happening today is it's pretty clear that pure play retailers are going to die, including Amazon. If Amazon stays an online-only company, they will die. And so it's a pretty big change, this omni-channel thing, this idea of addressing your customers wherever they show up. But just some stats to address it. Almost 97% of retail now starts online in some form or another. So before the customer walks in the store, they've already looked up the item. They've already looked at the price. They've educated themselves exactly what they want. They've looked at the reviews. They've communicated with their friends about it. And in fact, it was feared, this whole idea of showrooming was feared a problem, that people were going to come into my store just to look at the item and then walk away and buy it somewhere else. The reality, though, the numbers say a very different story. The numbers say if the consumer pulls out their phone while in the store, sales go up 40% if you know how to communicate with them on that channel. So being an omni-channel retailer is no longer optional. Some additional numbers, this idea of click and collect, buying online and picking up in store is also becoming a norm. This is one of the things that's bringing life back into brick and mortar retailers. The ones that have figured out how to do it best are seeing huge rewards. Macy's now has seen a huge reinvigoration of their sales. And so has Best Buy. Companies that we thought were going to die a few years ago are seeing an enormous uptick. Best Buy is a great example because only 2 years ago, everyone thought they were going to go bankrupt. Everyone's buying electronics online. They did something very interesting, though. They embraced this idea of buy online, pick up in store, so much so that they turned their stores into warehouses. All of a sudden, they had more warehouses than Amazon. And they can deliver that item faster than Amazon could. And now, as you can tell, in their top-selling items, they can deliver most of their top-selling electronics faster than Amazon. And therefore, consumers are reacting in a very positive way. They're coming back in droves. And it's something that Amazon can't do because Amazon has built these massive fulfillment centers, right? You can only build 10, 20 of these max. But Best Buy has thousands of stores, so turning hundreds into mini warehouses becomes a logistics advantage. And then finally, the best example of this is that the best retailers in the world have become these omni-channel retailers. Obviously, Apple is the best of this. Almost half of their sales are now buy online, pick up in store, by the way. But they give you a great experience about it. Retail used to be about selection and price. If you wanted to win, you got the best selection at the best price. And that's why big box retail became an age. For the last 3 decades, big box retail has dominated. What's happened in the last few years, though, is that experience has become king. And on the back of that, Apple has become the most successful retailer in the world. They've created the non-store. So when Steve Jobs used to talk about it, or Ron Johnson, the guy who created this concept at Apple, he called it the non-store. He hated the idea of a conventional store. He wanted an experience. When the customer walked in, he wanted the customer to feel like they were at a theme park, that they were in a happy place. And that's why you see Apple stores so packed. But it's translated to several other guys, including Warby Parker, which is, most of you won't know them, but in the US, they're an eyeglass retailer. They started online just a few years ago, and now they're putting stores, physical stores in Manhattan, very successful, second only to Apple. And so, then where does that leave us? Well, there's all these questions about who's going to win the wallet game. And you know, there's so many different wallets. Are we going to have all of these wallets around? Well, I'm here to tell you, I've held this view for a while now. It's always been very clear to me. I've always believed that the mobile operating system was going to become a wallet. It was actually going to become the wallet. It will be very, very difficult to compete with the mobile operating system as a wallet. The challenge was, will the rest of the ecosystem work with them? I spent a lot of time at Google trying to make that happen. Apple has made a breakthrough over the last few months in bringing Apple Pay to market with the incumbents. And it's put in a new age of collaboration between technology companies and payment incumbents. And that new age has solidified the operating system as the mobile wallet. It's really, really hard to compete with the operating system as the wallet because they have an advantage that's unparalleled. The best example I can give you is TCP/IP, and I apologize if I'm getting too technical, but TCP/IP is the heart of the internet, the protocol that allows the internet to exist. Now, if you go back to the early 90s, a Windows machine shipped without TCP/IP, without internet capability. If you were around back then, you remember it. And so, for a long time, PCs shipped without it. In fact, Novell became a multi-billion-dollar company, putting TCP/IP into machines, including Windows machines. But around 1995, Bill Gates had an epiphany. He had to put it in the device, and that literally paved the way for the internet and the web as we know it. Now, it killed Novell because there was no reason to put it back in anymore, but it created a huge era of growth. It was always meant to be inside the PC. Facilitating networking was always meant to be inside the device, and in a mobile device, we don't even think about it anymore, this next generation device. I believe payments was always meant to be bundled into the operating system. The big difference is, unlike my former employer, PayPal, my new employer, or sorry, my follow-on employer, Google and Apple, are not interested in making money in payments. They're more interested in facilitating the transaction, in winning the consumer goodwill. And as a result, they're willing to partner in a way that's less disruptive to the ecosystem, and that will pave the way for Google Wallet and Apple Pay to be the standard. And with that, there's probably just one other device we need to solve now, the merchant side device, and that's what Poynt, my company, is focused on. I'll stop there and take questions. Thank you.